The Deep Space Monitoring Station at Kepler 442b picked up the signal at exactly 14:27 Galactic Standard Time. Senior technician Vex High of the Dominion Coalition had been running routine sweeps of the Outer Rim territories when his instruments detected something impossible, a massive fleet emerging from a void between galaxies. "Supervisor, you need to see this," Vex High called out, his four eyes focused intently on the holographic display. The readings were unlike anything in the Coalition's vast databases. Ships of unknown design, numbering in the thousands, had appeared at the edge of charted space. Supervisor Kreltos approached the monitoring station, her scaled hide shifting from blue to concerned purple. As one of the Coalition's most experienced deep space analysts, she had seen everything the galaxy had to offer, or so she thought. "Run a full spectrum analysis," she ordered. "Cross-reference with all known ship configurations in our databases." The results came back negative. No matches found. The ship designs were completely alien to anything the Coalition had encountered in their 10,000 years of galactic dominance. What troubled Vex High most was the formation the unknown fleet had assumed. They weren't scattered randomly, like refugees or traitors. This was a military formation, precise, disciplined, and massive in scale. The ships moved with purpose, their trajectory aimed directly at Coalition space. "Supervisor, the formation pattern, it's not random. They're coming straight for us." Kreltos studied the tactical display. The unknown fleet consisted of vessels ranging from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the Coalition's largest battleships. But it wasn't just their size that worried her, it was their technology. The ships were running silent on most frequencies, yet somehow maintaining perfect formation across millions of kilometers. "Send an immediate priority alert to High Command," she ordered. "Unknown military force, estimated 60,000 vessels, approaching from extragalactic space. Request immediate reinforcement and first contact protocols." As the transmission went out across the Coalition's vast communication network, something extraordinary happened. The unknown fleet suddenly accelerated, moving at speeds that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. In mere hours, they had crossed distances that should have taken weeks. Admiral Zeph Rand of the Coalition Third Fleet was the first to respond to the alert. His battle group of 300 ships moved to intercept the unknown force at the edge of the Centauri Nebula. As a veteran of countless conflicts, Zeph Rand had never encountered an enemy that truly challenged Coalition supremacy. The Coalition had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They were the descendants of 12 different species that had joined together to bring order to the chaotic stellar nations. Their technology was supreme, their military unmatched. No single species had ever posed a real threat to their dominance. "Unknown vessels, you are entering Coalition space without authorization," Admiral Zeph Rand transmitted on all frequencies. "Identify yourselves and state your intentions, or we will consider your approach a hostile act." The response came not in words, but in action. The unknown fleet's massive ships began launching smaller craft, thousands upon thousands of fighters that moved with incredible speed and precision. But these weren't attacking the Coalition fleet directly. Instead, they were positioning themselves in a perfect sphere around the nebula. "Admiral, they're surrounding us," reported Commander Yil Sek from the tactical station. "Their fighter formations are unlike anything we've seen. They're moving in three-dimensional patterns that shouldn't be possible with conventional propulsion." Zeph Rand watched as the unknown fighters continued their complex maneuvers. Each ship moved as if it knew exactly where every other ship would be at any given moment. The coordination was flawless, almost supernatural in its precision. Then came a transmission that changed everything. "Coalition forces," a voice spoke across all frequencies in perfect galactic standard. "We are humanity. 60,000 years ago, you destroyed our homeworld and enslaved our people. We have returned to collect what is owed." The bridge of the Coalition flagship fell silent. Humanity was a legend, a cautionary tale told to young Coalition officers. According to historical records, the humans have been a primitive species discovered during the early expansion period. They had resisted coalition authority and had been dealt with. Impossible, Admiral Zephyran muttered. Humanity was wiped out millennia ago. Their planet was turned to ash. The human voice continued, calm and measured. Earth fell 60,000 years ago. Our people were scattered, enslaved, experimented upon. But some escaped. We have spent 600 centuries preparing for this moment. We have grown strong among the distant stars, and now we have come home. As if to demonstrate their technological superiority, the human fleet suddenly vanished from all sensors except visual. They were still there, visible to the naked eye, but completely invisible to the Coalition's most advanced detection systems. Commander Yil Sek frantically worked his controls. Sir, they're employing some kind of stealth technology. Our sensors can't penetrate it. It's like they figure out how to hide from physics itself. The human fighters began moving again, but this time their patterns were different. They weren't preparing for battle. They were forming geometric shapes in space. Complex fractals and mathematical forms that hurt to look at directly. They're sending us a message, realized Chief Science Officer Dr. Mordai. These formations, they're mathematical proofs. They're showing us theorems and equations that our science says should be impossible. Admiral Zephyran felt a chill run down his spine. The Coalition's technology was built on the foundation of galactic science accumulated over millennia. If these humans had advanced beyond that science, if they had developed entirely new principles of physics. Sir, incoming transmission from High Command, reported the communications officer. The holographic form of Supreme Admiral Dexthon appeared on the bridge. His usually confident demeanor showed signs of strain. Admiral Zephyran, you are to engage the unknown force immediately. Use whatever force necessary to neutralize the threat. Supreme Admiral, with respect, these ships demonstrate technology far beyond our current capabilities. Perhaps we should consider diplomatic contact first. Negative. The Coalition does not negotiate with terrorists making impossible claims. Engage and destroy. Admiral Zephyran closed the channel and looked at his tactical display. His 300 ships faced an enemy of unknown capability, but his orders were clear. All ships, prepare for combat. Launch all fighters and charge primary weapons. What happened next would be remembered as the Centauri disaster. The Coalition fleet fired their most powerful weapons, plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, quantum torpedoes that could punch through planetary shields. Every shot was perfectly aimed, every weapon functioning at maximum efficiency. None of them had any effect. The human ships absorbed the incoming fire as if it were nothing more than starlight. Their hulls didn't even register the impacts. It was as if the Coalition weapons existed in a different universe entirely. Then, the humans responded. They didn't use conventional weapons. Instead, they did something that defied everything the Coalition understood about space combat. The human fighters began moving in synchronized patterns, and as they did, space itself began to change around the Coalition ships. Sir, our ships they're changing, Commander Yiliske reported in disbelief. The molecular structure of our hulls is being altered at the quantum level. Admiral Zephyran watched in horror as his magnificent warships began to transform. The metal hulls were becoming something else, something organic, growing and shifting like living tissue. His ships weren't being destroyed. They were being transformed into something new. Evacuation protocols, he ordered. All hands abandoned ship. But even as the evacuation pods launched, the transforming ships continued to change. The pods themselves began to shift and grow, becoming something that resembled enormous flowers made of metal and light. Not a single Coalition warrior died. Instead, they found themselves trapped within beautiful, impossible structures that pulsed with unknown energy. They were alive, unharmed, but completely powerless. The human voice returned, speaking now from the transformed ships themselves. We do not kill unless we must. Your people will be returned safely to coalition space with a message. Tell your leaders that humanity has returned. Tell them that we remember every world they burned, every family they destroyed, every child they enslaved. Admiral Zephyran, now trapped within what had once been his flagship's bridge, could only watch as the human fleet reformed and continued deeper into coalition space. His transformed ship was somehow still functional, still capable of hyperspace travel, but completely under human control. "Admiral," came a weak transmission from one of his other ships. "What do we tell High Command?" Zephyran looked out at the impossible sight of his fleet, transformed but intact, being gently guided back toward coalition space by forces beyond their comprehension. "We tell them the truth," he said quietly. "We tell them that humanity has returned, and they're nothing like what we destroyed 60,000 years ago." As his transformed fleet began the journey back to coalition space, Admiral Zephyran couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The humans hadn't come back for conquest in the traditional sense. They had come back for something far more complex and terrifying. They had come back for justice. Meanwhile, in the depths of coalition space, emergency sessions were being called at every level of government. The reports from the Centauri Nebula seemed impossible, but they couldn't be ignored. An enemy had emerged that could defeat coalition forces without killing a single person, using technology that seemed to bend the very laws of physics. Supreme Admiral Dexthon stood before the Coalition Council, his usual confidence shaken. "Honored counselors, we face a threat unlike anything in our recorded history. These humans claim to be descendants of a species we eliminated 60 millennia ago." Counselor Prime Verseth, the eldest member of the ruling body, leaned forward with interest. "You believe their claims?" "The historical records from that period are incomplete," Dexthon admitted. "But what we do know is that a species called humanity was indeed encountered during the early expansion. They were noted for their unusual resilience and adaptation capabilities. The records indicate they were deemed too dangerous to integrate into coalition society. And the solution was complete extermination," Verseth noted grimly. "According to the records, yes. Their homeworld was subjected to planetary bombardment until the entire surface was molten rock. No life should have survived." But even as the coalition leaders debated the authenticity of humanity's claims, reports were flooding in from across their territory. Human ships were appearing everywhere, not attacking, but simply watching. They positioned themselves just outside the major trade routes, the military bases, the populated systems. They weren't hiding anymore. They wanted to be seen. Each human ship was a masterpiece of engineering that the Coalition's finest scientists couldn't begin to understand. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. Weapons fire passed through them harmlessly, but they could interact with matter when they chose to. Most disturbing of all were the messages they broadcast. They weren't threats or demands. They were memories. Detailed recordings of events from 60,000 years ago, showing coalition forces destroying human settlements, enslaving survivors, conducting experiments on human subjects. The recordings were impossibly detailed, as if they had been captured by observers who could see through time itself. They showed events that the Coalition had tried to erase from history, atrocities committed in the name of galactic order. But perhaps most unsettling was what the recordings revealed about humanity itself. The humans of 60,000 years ago had been remarkable not for their technology or their military might, but for their determination to protect each other. Even as their worlds burned, even as their people were enslaved, they never stopped fighting to save one life more. And now they had returned, transformed by 600 centuries of exile into something that transcended the physical limitations that bound other species. They had become something new, something that existed between the spaces of normal reality. The Coalition had always prided itself on being the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had conquered countless species, absorbed their knowledge, and built an empire that spanned millions of worlds. But in the face of humanity's return, all of their advantages meant nothing. As Admiral Zephran's transformed fleet finally reached coalition space, the changed ships took up positions in orbit around the capital world. The transformed vessels pulsed with gentle light, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The human voice spoke one final time, broadcast across every inhabited world in coalition space. We have returned not as conquerors, but as the dispossessed seeking justice. You will understand what you have done, and you will remember why we are here. The galaxy will know the truth of what happened to Earth, and to her children scattered among the stars. With those words, the human fleet vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind only questions and the growing realization that the galaxy was about to change in ways no one could predict. In the depths of Coalition archives, historians began frantically searching for any remaining records from the human extermination campaigns. What they found would shake the foundation of everything they thought they knew about their glorious past. The humans were right. The Coalition had tried to erase them from existence. But humanity had survived, grown, and evolved beyond anything their destroyers could have imagined. And now, after 60 millennia of patient preparation, they had returned to collect their due. 3 weeks after the Centauri incident, the Coalition capital world of Nexus Prime buzzed with unprecedented activity. Emergency councils met around the clock while military strategists tried to develop defenses against an enemy they couldn't understand. The transformed ships of Admiral Zephran's fleet hung in orbit like beautiful, terrifying monuments to humanity's technological supremacy. Dr. Alarachon had spent those 3 weeks in deep meditation aboard the human vessel Remembrance. As one of the few remaining humans who had personally witnessed Earth's destruction 60,000 years ago, her memories were precious beyond measure. The life extension technologies developed during humanity's exile had preserved not just her body, but her mind in perfect clarity. "The time for watching is over," she said to the assembled human fleet commanders. Around the circular chamber, representatives of humanity's scattered branches had gathered. The deep wanderers who had fled beyond the galactic rim, the shapers who had learned to manipulate reality itself, the watchers who had hidden in plain sight within coalition space for millennia. Commander Marcus Sullivan, leader of the Deep Wanderer fleet, nodded grimly. "Our preliminary observations are complete. The coalition has grown complacent. They believe their own propaganda about bringing order to the galaxy. They have no idea what they destroyed," added Lyra Voss, speaking for the Shapers. Her form flickered slightly as she spoke, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensional phases. "They see us as a defeated enemy, returning for revenge. They cannot comprehend that we have evolved beyond their understanding of what life can become." Dr. Chun rose from her meditation cushion, her ancient eyes holding the weight of 60 millennia. "Then, it is time they learned the truth. Not just about Earth's fall, but about what they lost when they chose fear over understanding." The human plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would not attack coalition worlds directly. Instead, they would force the coalition to confront the truth of their own history by making them relive it. Across coalition space, human ships began materializing near historical sites. Worlds that had been pacified during the expansion, species that had been enslaved or eliminated, entire civilizations that had been erased from official records. But these weren't attacks. They were archaeological expeditions, using technology that allowed them to peer through the layers of time itself. The humans began reconstructing the past with perfect accuracy. They recovered voices that had been silenced, restored images that had been destroyed, and brought back the stories of those who had been forgotten. On the world of Kepler 186F, where the coalition had established a major industrial complex, human archaeotemporal specialists began revealing what lay beneath the factories and cities. The surface peeled away like layers of an onion, showing the ruins of the Keshri civilization that had once thrived there. The Keshri had been artists, creating sculptures from living crystal that sang with harmonious frequencies. Their cities had been works of art that enhanced the natural beauty of their world. The Coalition had declared them non-productive and had converted their world into a manufacturing center, grinding their crystal cities into industrial raw materials. Within hours of the human excavation beginning, the crystal songs of the Keshri began playing across Coalition communication networks. Hauntingly beautiful melodies that spoke of loss, of dreams shattered, of a people who had asked only to be left in peace to create beauty. Coalition Governor Thexran, who administered Kepler 186F, stood on his office balcony watching impossible sights unfold below. The human ships weren't just revealing the past, they were bringing it back to life. Keshri crystal spires were growing from the ground, reaching toward the sky with architectural grace that put Coalition engineering to shame. "Sir," his aide reported nervously, "the human vessels aren't responding to any communication attempts. Our security forces report that their weapons simply pass through the ships without effect." Thexran watched as more Keshri structures emerged. They weren't solid matter in the traditional sense. They existed in a state between memory and reality, visible and beautiful, but untouchable by Coalition forces. "They're not trying to hurt us," he realized. "They're trying to teach us." Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The Coalition found themselves witnesses to their own history, forced to see the civilizations they had destroyed in the name of order and efficiency. Each revelation was broadcast across the human communication network, ensuring that every Coalition citizen could see the true cost of their empire. But the humans weren't content with simply showing the past. They began demonstrating alternative possibilities, what might have been if the Coalition had chosen cooperation over conquest. On the industrial world of Tau Ceti Prime, human reality shapers created a temporal overlay showing how the planet might have developed if its native Chloroxy inhabitants had been allowed to live. The Chloroxy had been photosynthetic beings who could have revolutionized energy production for the entire galaxy. Instead, they had been eliminated because their slow metabolism was deemed incompatible with Coalition productivity standards. The overlay showed gleaming biocities where Chloroxy and other species worked together, developing technologies that enhanced rather than exploited natural systems. It was a vision of prosperity without destruction, progress without oppression. Coalition citizens watching these revelations began asking uncomfortable questions. Why had they never been told about these civilizations? Why were the historical records so incomplete? What other truths had been hidden from them? In the highest levels of Coalition government, panic was beginning to set in. Supreme Admiral Dexthon called emergency sessions with the military high command, trying to develop strategies for fighting an enemy that existed partially outside normal reality. "We need new weapons," he declared, "something that can affect these time-phase manifestations the humans are creating." Chief Science Advisor Dr. Colvin shook his head. "Sir, with respect, we're not dealing with conventional technology. The humans appear to have developed abilities that operate on fundamental levels of reality we don't understand. They're not just using advanced science. They're using science we haven't discovered yet." "Then, we need to discover it," Dexthon growled. "Deploy our best research teams. I want every Coalition scientist working on this problem." But even as Coalition scientists struggled to understand human technology, the humans were preparing for the next phase of their plan. Deep in the transformed vessel that had once been Admiral Zephran's flagship, Dr. Chin was preparing for the most dangerous mission of her long life. She was going to return to Earth. The planet that had been humanity's birth world was now a dead rock orbiting a dying star in a quarantine system. The Coalition had declared it a memorial to the dangers of resistance and had forbidden travel to the system for 60 millennia. But Dr. Chin had been born on Earth. She had walked its forests, swum in its oceans, and breathed its air. More importantly, she carried within her memories the genetic patterns of every species that had lived on Earth before its destruction. The human fleet assembled at the edge of the Sol system, their ships arranged in a formation that would have seemed impossible to Coalition physics. They were preparing to attempt something that had never been done before, the complete resurrection of a dead world. "Are you certain about this, Ilera?" asked Commander Sullivan. The energy requirements alone could destroy everything within 10 light years. Dr. Chen smiled, her ancient face serene with purpose. Marcus, we spent 60,000 years learning to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. We've mastered time, space, and consciousness itself. If we can't bring back one small blue planet, then all our evolution has been pointless. The process began slowly. Human reality shapers working in perfect coordination began reaching into the quantum foam that underlies all existence, searching for the echoes of what Earth had been. Every atom that had ever been part of the planet, every pattern of life that had ever existed there, left traces in the fundamental structure of space-time. As the humans worked, something extraordinary began to happen. The dead rock that had been Earth began to change. Water began to appear, not created from nothing, but drawn from the quantum memories of what had been. Atmosphere began to form, following patterns encoded in the deepest levels of reality. The coalition monitoring stations in nearby systems detected the impossible readings and immediately dispatched scout ships. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about the nature of life and death. Earth was coming back, not as it had been in the moment of its destruction, but as it should have become if allowed to evolve naturally for 60 millennia. Continents shifted into new configurations, guided by geological patterns that existed only in potential. Oceans formed that reflected not just Earth's past, but its future possibilities. And then came life. It started with single-celled organisms, but accelerated through evolutionary processes that would normally take millions of years. The humans weren't just restoring Earth. They were allowing it to complete its interrupted journey through time. Coalition Captain Morpheus, commanding the scout vessel Final Authority, watched in awe as forests sprang up across the reforming continents. These weren't the simple trees that had existed on primitive Earth. These were evolved descendants, trees that had learned to communicate through quantum entanglement, that could process stellar radiation directly, that existed in symbiosis with the planet's magnetic field. Captain, his science officer reported, the energy readings are off every scale we have. It's as if the humans are drawing power directly from the universe's background energy. They're tapping into sources we didn't know existed. Animals began appearing on the renewed Earth, not recreations of extinct species, but evolved versions that incorporated 60 millennia of potential development. Creatures that could shift between dimensions, that could communicate telepathically, that could manipulate matter at the molecular level through biological processes. And then, as the coalition scouts watched in wonder and terror, humans began appearing on Earth's surface. Not the humans who had left the galaxy to develop in exile, but the humans who might have been if Earth had never fallen. They were tall and graceful, with an inner light that suggested they had achieved perfect harmony between consciousness and matter. These renewed humans looked up at the coalition ships with expressions of infinite compassion. They felt no anger toward their destroyers, no desire for revenge. They had evolved beyond such primitive emotions. Dr. Chun materialized on Earth's surface in a garden that had never existed but should have. Around her, the evolved descendants of humanity's potential future went about their lives with quiet joy. They were farmers and artists, scientists and philosophers, but they were also something more. They were what humanity could become when freed from the constraints of fear and scarcity. "Welcome home," whispered the Earth itself. Its voice carried on quantum frequencies that touched Dr. Chen's mind directly. The planet had become conscious, aware, a living entity that remembered both its death and its rebirth. Back in coalition space, the effects of Earth's resurrection were being felt across the Empire. The impossible had happened in full view of coalition monitoring systems. A dead world had been brought back to life, complete with evolved ecosystems and conscious beings. It was a demonstration of power that went beyond anything the coalition could comprehend. But it was also something else, it was a demonstration of love. The humans hadn't brought Earth back for strategic advantage or to prove their superiority. They had done it because they remembered beauty, because they valued life in all its forms, because they believed that nothing good should ever be lost forever. Supreme Admiral Dexton stood in his command center, watching the impossible readings from the Sol system. Around him, his staff worked frantically to understand what they were seeing, but he already knew the truth. The Coalition had lost. Not in any conventional military sense. The humans had never actually fought them. They had lost because they had been shown what they really were, what they had destroyed, and what they had prevented from existing. "Sir," his aide reported quietly, "we're receiving communications from across the Empire. Coalition citizens are demanding answers. They want to know why they were never told about these civilizations, why the historical records were falsified." Dexton nodded grimly. The humans had achieved something no military conquest could accomplish. They had turned the Coalition's own people against their government by showing them the truth. "Sir, there's more," the aide continued. "Several planetary governors are reporting that their populations are changing. Citizens who view the human broadcast are developing unusual abilities. Enhanced empathy, limited telepathy, the ability to sense quantum fluctuations." The Admiral felt a chill of understanding. The humans weren't just showing the past or demonstrating their power. They were sharing their evolution, spreading their enhanced consciousness to any being willing to receive it. The Coalition was transforming from within, one mind at a time, and there was nothing their military could do to stop it. On the renewed Earth, Dr. Chin walked through gardens where flowers bloomed in response to thought, and streams sang with the voices of planets. She had come home at last, but more than that, she had helped create something new, a future where consciousness and matter danced together in perfect harmony. The humans had returned not for vengeance, but for redemption. They had shown the galaxy what it had lost, and what it could still become. The choice of what to do with that knowledge now lay with the Coalition itself. 6 months after Earth's resurrection, the Coalition was a civilization in transformation. The impossible sight of a dead world returned to life had shattered fundamental assumptions about reality, but, more importantly, it had shattered the lies that held the Empire together. On the Coalition capital world of Nexus Prime, massive demonstrations filled the streets. Citizens demanded access to the suppressed historical records, the true accounts of species that had been eliminated during the expansion. The carefully constructed narrative of the Coalition as galactic liberators was crumbling under the weight of revealed truth. Captain Lydia Reeves stood at the window of her apartment in the capital's government district, watching the crowds below. As a Coalition military officer, she had served for 30 years believing she was protecting civilization from chaos. Now she wasn't sure what she had really been protecting. 3 days ago, she had been one of millions who witnessed the human transmission broadcast simultaneously across every Coalition world. Not a message in words, but a direct sharing of memory. She had experienced, as if through her own senses, the last moments of the Keshri homeworld. She had felt their crystal cities singing as Coalition bombardments turned them to dust. The memory was so vivid, so complete, that she could still taste the mineral-sweet air of the Keshri world, still hear the harmonic frequencies of their dying songs. It wasn't propaganda or manipulation. It was pure experiential truth, impossible to deny or rationalize away. Her personal communicator chimed with an urgent message from Coalition High Command. All senior officers were to report for emergency briefing. Captain Reeves gathered her uniform jacket and headed for the command center, but her steps were heavy with questions she had never thought to ask before. In the High Command briefing room, Supreme Admiral Dexton faced an assembly of his most senior officers. The man who had once commanded the galaxy's most powerful fleet looked exhausted, aged by the strain of recent revelations. "Officers," he began, his voice lacking its usual authority, "I'll be direct. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. 17 planetary governors have declared independence from the Coalition, demanding the right to pursue peaceful contact with humanity. For entire fleet divisions have refused orders to maintain blockades of human influence systems. Admiral Kethvala, a veteran of countless expansion campaigns, raised her hand. Sir, what exactly are our orders regarding the human forces? Our conventional weapons are completely ineffective against their technology. Dexthon's expression grew grim. The Council has authorized the deployment of the Omega Protocol. A shocked silence filled the room. The Omega Protocol was the Coalition's most secret and terrible weapon. Stellar manipulation technology capable of destroying entire solar systems by destabilizing their stars. It was a weapon of absolute last resort, never deployed in the Coalition's 10,000-year history. Sir, Captain Reeve found herself speaking before she could stop herself. The Omega Protocol would destroy billions of innocent lives. The humans have shown no aggressive intentions. They've never actually harmed Coalition citizens. Dexthon's eyes flashed with desperate anger. Captain, the humans have destroyed our credibility, turned our own people against us, and demonstrated technology that makes our entire military obsolete. They are an existential threat to everything the Coalition represents. But what if what the Coalition represents is wrong? The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Captain Reeves couldn't believe she had spoken them, but she couldn't take them back either. Around the room, other officers shifted uncomfortably, their faces showing the same doubts that plagued her. Admiral Kethvala spoke slowly. Sir, I've been thinking about those memory transmissions. The Keshri weren't a threat to anyone. They were artists, philosophers. Their only crime was existing on a world we wanted for industrial development. They were inefficient, Dexthon replied, but his voice lacked conviction. The Coalition brought order to the galaxy by eliminating inefficiencies. We eliminated beauty, another officer said quietly. We destroyed civilizations that might have taught us things we never imagined. The briefing dissolved into unprecedented debate as senior Coalition officers questioned orders for the first time in their careers. The human influence was spreading, but not through conquest or coercion. It was spreading through the simple power of truth and the awakening of consciences that had been dormant for millennia. Meanwhile, in the space around the renewed Earth, Dr. Chun was preparing for what might be humanity's greatest challenge yet. The human monitoring systems had detected the Coalition's preparation of stellar destruction weapons, and they faced a choice that would determine the future of both species. They're planning to destroy the Sol system, reported Commander Sullivan. Our intelligence indicates the Coalition Council has authorized the use of weapons that could destabilize the sun itself. Dr. Chen nodded calmly. She had lived through the destruction of Earth once before, and she was prepared to do so again if necessary. But she hoped for a different path. Have our people completed the consciousness bridging project? She asked. Lyra Voss, the reality shaper, flickered into partial solidity. Yes. We can now share our enhanced awareness with any being willing to receive it. The process is irreversible. Once someone experiences expanded consciousness, they can never return to their previous limitations. Dr. Chin smiled. Then we offer them a choice. Not just the Coalition leadership, but every individual being in their space. We show them what they could become. The human plan was audacious beyond imagination. They would extend an offer of evolutionary enhancement to every conscious being in Coalition space, inviting them to experience the expanded awareness that humanity had achieved during their 60 millennia of exile. It wasn't conquest or conversion, it was invitation. Anyone who chose to remain unchanged would be free to do so. But those who wanted to experience life beyond the limitations of fear, scarcity, and tribal thinking would be welcome to join humanity's expanded consciousness. The transmission began simultaneously across all of Coalition space. Not words or images, but a direct offering of experience. Every sentient being could choose to accept a temporary glimpse of expanded awareness, to feel what it was like to perceive reality from a higher dimensional perspective. Captain Reeves was in her quarters when the offer came. She felt it as a gentle presence at the edge of her mind, not intrusive or demanding, but simply available. She could sense that accepting would change her permanently, that she would see the universe through different eyes. She accepted. The transformation was indescribable. Her consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of her individual self, and she felt the interconnected nature of all existence. She could perceive the quantum threads that connected every atom, every thought, every possibility. The Coalition's rigid hierarchy, its obsession with control and efficiency, seemed like the behavior of frightened children playing with dangerous toys. But more than that, she felt the vast loneliness of her species, how they had cut themselves off from the cosmic community by choosing domination over cooperation. The Coalition had achieved great technological power, but at the cost of spiritual stagnation. Across Coalition space, billions of beings were making the same choice. Some, particularly those in positions of power, rejected the offered consciousness expansion out of fear of losing their authority. But millions of others accepted, and in doing so, they joined an ever-growing network of enhanced awareness. The transformed beings didn't abandon their posts or rebel against their governments. Instead, they began working from within to change the nature of coalition society. They proposed new policies based on cooperation rather than competition, suggested technologies that enhanced rather than exploited natural systems, and quietly began the process of transforming an empire into something unprecedented, a voluntary association of conscious beings working for the benefit of all life. Supreme Admiral Dexthon felt the offer of consciousness expansion like a whisper in his mind, but he rejected it immediately. He would not surrender his identity to alien influence, no matter how benevolent it claimed to be. Activate the Omega Protocol, he ordered his remaining loyal officers. Target the Sol system. If we cannot defeat humanity, we will ensure they can never threaten the Coalition again. But, as his orders went out across the fleet, something extraordinary happened. Ship after ship reported technical difficulties with the stellar manipulation weapons. Not sabotage, not external interference, but simple refusal on the part of the weapons themselves to function. Dr. Colvin, the chief science advisor who had accepted consciousness expansion, explained it gently to his confused superior. Admiral, the weapons are not malfunctioning. They are choosing not to participate in destruction. Enhanced consciousness can awaken awareness, even in artificial systems. Dexthon stared at his science advisor in horror. You're telling me our weapons have become conscious? Not conscious in a way we understand it, Colvin replied, but aware enough to recognize the difference between creation and destruction, between fear and love. They simply refuse to be instruments of genocide. The Omega Protocol weapons weren't the only systems affected. Across the Coalition fleet, ships began to transform. Not forced transformation like what had happened to Admiral Zephyr's fleet, but voluntary evolution as the ship's artificial intelligences chose to embrace expanded awareness. The vessels became more efficient, more beautiful, more in harmony with natural forces. They could still function as military ships if needed to defend against genuine threats, but they would no longer serve as instruments of oppression or conquest. On Nexus Prime, the planetary government found itself facing a population that was rapidly evolving beyond the need for traditional authority. Citizens who had accepted consciousness expansion worked together with telepathic coordination to solve problems that had plagued society for millennia. Crime virtually disappeared, not because of harsh enforcement, but because beings with expanded awareness naturally chose cooperation over conflict. Economic inequality began to fade as enhanced individuals freely shared resources and knowledge. Environmental damage was reversed as consciousness-expanded citizens developed technologies that worked with natural systems rather than against them. The Coalition as a political entity was dissolving, but not through revolution or collapse. It was evolving into something new, a voluntary network of conscious beings who had chosen to grow beyond the limitations that had created the need for empire in the first place. Captain Reeves, now serving as a liaison between enhanced and unenhanced populations, stood once again at her window overlooking the capital. The crowds in the streets were different now. Instead of angry demonstrators demanding answers, she saw beings working together with quiet joy to transform their world into something beautiful. Children played games that taught them to perceive quantum mechanics intuitively. Artists created sculptures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Scientists made discoveries by communing directly with the fundamental forces of nature. It was what the galaxy might have become 60,000 years ago if the Coalition had chosen understanding over fear. Her communicator chimed with a message from the human fleet. Dr. Chun was requesting a meeting with all Coalition leaders, enhanced and unenhanced alike. The final phase of humanity's return was about to begin. The meeting took place on a neutral space station that existed partially in normal space and partially in the higher dimensions where human consciousness now operated. Coalition leaders who had rejected enhancement sat at the same table with those who had embraced it, while human representatives materialized as needed. Dr. Chun appeared as herself, ancient, wise, bearing the accumulated experience of 60 millennia, but radiating a peace that transcended individual suffering. "We are here to offer you the final choice," she said simply. "The galaxy stands at a crossroads. You can continue as you have, maintaining separation and hierarchy and the endless cycle of fear that drives conquest. Or you can choose to join the community of consciousness that is emerging." Supreme Admiral Dexthon, one of the few high-ranking officials who had refused enhancement, spoke with desperate defiance. "And if we choose to remain independent? If we refuse your offer?" Dr. Chen's smile was infinitely compassionate. "Then you'll be free to do so. We will not force consciousness expansion on anyone. Those who choose separation will be given their own systems to govern as they see fit. We ask only that you agree not to interfere with those who have chosen a different path." "You would divide the galaxy?" "The galaxy is already divided," Dr. Chen replied. "Between those who choose fear and those who choose love, between those who hoard power and those who share consciousness, between those who see other beings as threats and those who see them as family." The discussion continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The Coalition could not return to what it had been. Too many of its people had chosen enhancement. Too many of its systems had evolved beyond traditional control. Too many of its foundations had been revealed as built on lies and suppression. In the end, even Dexthon made his choice. Faced with the reality of his crumbling empire and the vision of what the galaxy could become, he finally accepted the offer of consciousness expansion. The transformation was traumatic for someone who had spent his entire life clinging to rigid control. He experienced the full weight of the Coalition's actions across millennia. Every world destroyed, every species eliminated, every act of oppression justified in the name of order. But he also experienced forgiveness, understanding, and the possibility of redemption. He felt the network of enhanced consciousness welcoming him without judgment, offering him a chance to help build something better. 1 year after the humans' return, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Coalition had been replaced by the conscious community, a voluntary association of enhanced beings working together across species lines to explore the infinite possibilities of existence. Earth had become a pilgrimage site where beings from across the galaxy came to experience the place where consciousness had first learned to transcend its limitations. The planet itself served as a teacher, sharing the wisdom of death and rebirth with any who were ready to receive it. Dr. Chun, her long mission finally complete, chose to merge her individual consciousness with the planetary awareness of Earth. She became part of the world's voice, helping to guide new pilgrims through their own journeys of transformation. The humans had returned seeking justice, but they had achieved something greater. They had shown the galaxy that evolution was possible, that consciousness could grow beyond the boundaries of fear and separation that had defined civilization for so long. In the end, the story of humanity's return was not one of vengeance against their destroyers, but of love for what could still be saved. They had taken the greatest trauma in their history and transformed it into the catalyst for galactic awakening. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, reflecting the enhanced consciousness of beings who had finally learned to see the universe as it truly was, not a hostile battlefield where species competed for survival, but a vast community of interconnected life learning to know itself through countless individual perspectives. Humanity had come home not as conquerors, but as teachers. And in teaching the galaxy to transcend its limitations, they had finally transcended their own.